lesson in this new series that we started, and the title of it is Lost. And we're going to be looking at some scripture that's pretty familiar as we go through this in Luke, looking at the story of the prodigal son. But before we get into the scripture this morning, have you ever been lost? Everywhere you went, you was there, wasn't you? For those who have been lost other than Joel, how does it feel to get truly lost? Is it a comforting feeling? Frustrating, scary? Yeah. If you haven't been lost before, you can ask Mitch, and he can tell you what it feels like to be lost. I stopped by and told him, and while he was sitting in his classroom this morning, I said, "You're going to be the topic of our lesson this morning on lost," because Mitch could get lost in his backyard. Almost literally could get lost in his backyard. Oh, and it tears him all pieces every time he gets lost. So he knows that feeling really well. So you can ask him that if after class how he felt when he got lost. I don't know if he's probably not going to be the topic of his own lesson because he probably don't want them to know he gets lost just quite so easily. It's a scary feeling. It's scary on both sides of it, right? If you're lost, it's certainly almost a panic feeling. And you see these stories where people's gotten lost in the woods and stuff like that, and you think, it's somewhere local. If they would just think, they could have went to a creek or went to, and followed that stuff. But what happens when we panic to our thought process? Yeah, it's totally irrational at that point. And until you calm down, we get very irrational in our thought, and we get panicky, and we start thinking, all the worst things, and we end up doing stuff that's totally different. They've actually talked about people that's being lost hiding before after so long that they heard the helicopters and they hid from it and stuff. You think, why would you do that? They're looking for you. But it's just the irrationality of being lost in your mind, just going through all these things is so difficult to process. But it's the same way. Have you ever lost something? And for most of y'all looking around, you're old enough to I know you've lost stuff. Are you lost now? What did you lose this morning before coming to church? I should say, could you find your Sensitive keys, all that kind of stuff. It's not a good feeling on that side of it either. I got tickled. I told Linda, I told Dad, I went down Friday. I've told y'all we bought some new calves, and we've got them separated into the field, kind of keeping them eye on them, stuff like that, and getting some feed to them, stuff while they're really just starting to grow good. So I went down to put some feed out, and they're in a field that's it's just about 3 or 4 acres, something like that, cut off. And I went up there to where they always are with the feed. Not a calf in sight. Looked around, hollered for them, not a sound, nothing. My first thought is, okay, they're just down under the hill. They'll come up here in a second. So I put the feed out and messed around, beating on the buckets because they know that means feed when they hear the buckets. Nothing. I'm starting to worry then. I'm thinking, okay, where are they? And whose field have they gone to besides ours? So I start walking the fence line and start seeing nothing. I'm still seeing nothing. I don't see any fur on the barbed wires, anything like that. And I'm thinking, somebody's either stolen. So I'm looking for tire tracks now as I'm walking. I'm looking for hoof prints. I'm looking for anything to say where they are. Now they're sitting over here under some trees, chewing a cud, just like out down there where they're at and like, what? Give me a heart attack for a few minutes because I was sitting there thinking, okay, here's the rest of my afternoon. I'm going to have to go try to find these calves all up and down the valley because no telling where they went. But even more scary, have you ever been in a store and when your kids were really small and they disappeared? How did you feel? It's horrible, isn't it? Oh my goodness. I mean, it's just terror runs through your whole body, even if it's for a few seconds. Just that moment of terror of what happened to my kids. And they could be on the other side of a rack playing hide and go seek. They think it's funny sometimes. And it's a really bad feeling. And so how do we react when we find them? Well, yeah, it's a mix, right? I'm gonna kill you, but first thing you do is want to hug them, right? It's that response. You just want to hug them. I'm glad you're okay, and then the scolding comes after that. Typically, I can't believe you walked off from me. I told you 10 times. Uh, but there's that longing to be back together. We look for them, and we want them, and we're going to hug them as quick as we can and get them back in our arms. Um, and we're going to see it a little bit this morning as we go through this. The lesson this morning, a lot of times when you hear lessons on the prodigal son, it's the whole story, but a lot of it focuses on the relationship between the brothers, right? When you hear these about the brother being jealous of the older brother being jealous of younger brother when he returns, because of the way the father treats him. But today you're going to look more at the condition of the younger son. What happened? What caused him to do this? What caused him to come back? And the reaction of the father when he comes back is something I think is very important to us. It's interesting. I had never really looked at before. I've always heard the prodigal son. The prodigal son. It's a story. I didn't really understand or cared what prodigal meant. But the word I looked it up in looking at this, and the word prodigal actually means a person who spends money recklessly, which I thought was very appropriate for this. And you know, I just never had really took the time to understand what that actually meant. So it's very describing of the story when we see this. So let's go ahead and get into the scripture. We're in Luke 15 this morning, and at this point, the Pharisees were getting a little upset with Jesus because Jesus kept reaching out to sinners, what they considered sinners, and bringing them in, inviting them in to do these things, which is what Jesus was here to do, right? Pharisees didn't like that too much. They wanted him to be for them and to have this circle of these people. So they were getting a little upset. Jesus had told some stories here about being lost. A couple before this one in the parables, but this one has been the one that has carried. People who's not in church have a lot of times have heard the story of the prodigal son. I've heard people that have nothing to do with church that'll say something, in passing about the prodigal son, and so it's a very well known story. So we're going to pick up in verse 11 when he starts talking about this parable. It says, he also said, a man who had two sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the estate I have coming to me. So he distributed assets to them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered together all he had and traveled to a distant country, where he squandered his estate in foolish living. After he had spent everything, a severe famine struck that country, and he had nothing. Now, some interesting things on this. If you look at this, the younger son, if you had two sons, the older son in that time, the common practice was the older son would get 2/3 of what the father had left them, and the younger son would get 1/3. Now, that is typically done, obviously, when the father passes, and this automatically just passes down to his sons. So it's a little unusual, but it wasn't unusual that it happened before the father died. It was unusual the way that the son asked for it, right? So it wasn't really uncommon, and we even see this today, but it's for a different reason, tax purposes, stuff like that, that people will move things into their kids' names, right? Well, that happened in that day too. It wasn't really that uncommon for a father to go ahead and move things over because the sons could take care of the place. When they got a certain age where they weren't able to go out and really take care of their properties the way they needed to, they would go ahead and pass that along to the sons, and the sons would then take ownership and the care of the properties. But it was pretty uncommon for especially a younger son to come in and say, I want my share, Dad. I want my share right now. Says a little bit about his age, right? Immaturity causes us to do a lot of weird things, and think about not thinking right. That's part of being immature. We think we know more than we do. So this younger son was thinking, I want my stuff. I don't know if he is tired of being under his dad. I don't know if he is frustrated at home and he just, I want to get away from here. I'm leaving, but I got to have money. He is new enough to know I don't have enough money to leave and on my own. And it's interesting to me, why do you think the father would have agreed to go ahead and do that? It doesn't tell us. I'm just asking your opinion. Why would he go ahead and grant him? He had to know his son well enough to know there was an ulterior motive for him asking for this. It wasn't just because I could sit here and look at it and say, this is mine. Why does God let us have our way sometimes? Sometimes it's just to see with our kids. We can sit and talk to them all day long, can't we? We can talk to them till we're blue in the face about why they shouldn't do or should do something. Sometimes you just got to let them make that mistake. And that's difficult as a parent. Nothing worse than sitting and watch your kids make a mistake, knowing they're making a mistake, and knowing this is one of those things you just got to let them make a mistake. And you know, you try to make it small mistakes, right? But sometimes we need to make mistakes when we're younger to build that knowledge and to understand, because we just don't like to listen when we're in that age, and especially in teenage years and stuff. I mean, it's just the ears turn off and the mouth opens or something. I'm not sure how that happens, but I remember going through that, and I remember my kids going through that. And it's funny, over the past few years, Linda and I have went back to college, obviously, and got an education, because our kids all of a sudden are realizing how smart we are. It's kind of nice. Y'all were right when you said that. And to hear them say things back now to other people that we have told them, I'm like, yeah, y'all heard that. And it kills them. Because they say, they'll tell each other, you sounded just like Mom. It's like, and Linda just grins. Yeah. So sometimes, but they've got to figure this out. So this younger son, he knew what he was wanting to do with this. So it says a few days later he took this and went with it. Now he may have sold the property to get the wealth, because a large part of what he would have gotten would have been property. It wouldn't have been so much just money. So he may have actually sold the property before he left. He doesn't go into that kind of detail, but it does say he went and he moved into said he traveled to a distant country. He went away. He went away from everything that he knew, everything his father would have been involved in, because whatever reason, he's wanting away. He's wanting to get out of there and make it on his own. And it says he squandered his estate. Literally, it talks like he's. If you go back to the original text, it's throwing. The word is used as like throwing shafts in the air and from the wheat, and the wind catching it, blowing it away. He literally threw his money away. It squandered it on things that he didn't need, on things that didn't make sense to spend it on, that wasn't helping him, thinking he was having a gay old time, right? He's living it up. I couldn't do this at home. Look what I can do now. I can do anything I want to. Dad's not here to tell me not to do that. So he's living life he thinks he wants to live. But what happens when all the money's gone? What happens when we can't live the style we want to live anymore with what we had? Reality starts setting in, don't it? And it says, after he had spent everything, a severe famine struck the country, and he had nothing. Now, in that day, a severe famine would have been destitute for the area. It'd be like, you think, severe famine, we could reckon that to, or liken that to the Great Depression era. You're not going to go somewhere and pick a job up real easy, because everybody now is scrambling because the crops aren't growing. It affects everything. Their lives are affected by this. So all of a sudden, he's went from, man, I've got it all, I can do anything, to all of a sudden, I reached in my wallet, and where'd that money go? I could have swore I had money in my wallet last week. Now, when you got kids, you know where your money goes, because your wallet you just hold it open for them when they come by, and they take stuff out of it and go on. So it's empty all the time. But he's had all this money, and probably didn't even think about. Well, it says he just squandered it. He wasn't trying to prepare for a future. He just wanted to have a good time, and probably didn't enter his mind that this is going to go away at some point. I need to think about how I spend this, because I don't know how long this was. It could have been a very short period of time. Could have been a longer period of time. But he went through it pretty quickly, to the point, and we skip a couple of verses here, but to the point, if you look at verse 16 in this, he and it's not in our book. I apologize for that, but do you remember what he did to survive? The work he did? Fed the pigs. Now, for a Jew, That was really, you couldn't get any worse. That was the worst job you could have, is go out and feed the pigs and work the hogs because they were considered unclean by the Jews. So not only couldn't eat them, stuff like that, but now he's not only having to deal with them, but he's in there feeding them. He's doing the lowest job he could do as a Jew. Is going in and feeding these pigs. Now I don't know if has anybody ever slopped hogs. I'll say. I never did call it feeding pigs. I always called it slopped hogs when we were growing up. Memo Parker always kept a slop bucket in the corner of the smokehouse, and that's where anything that was left over that was spoiled milk, anything that was not edible for us, it went in a slop bucket. And when I'd go down there and spend time with them, one of the jobs I had to do was go out and slop pigs. And I used to hate to pick that bucket up because, I mean, if you hoped you didn't break that surface. That smell would stay kind of film over it because when it broke, it's because it always had spoiled milk in it and buttermilk and whatever. Buttermilk is just a whole thing all its own. But, I hated it. And you think, he went from living the life of Riley to now he's having to do this. He's having to take care of these pigs, which, by the way, I got out of a little bit later. And when I was younger, I had allergies to pig manure. Believe it or not, if you go get, they have to put it on your body, and the doctor had it. Now that's even more scary, and it wasn't a vet. When I used to swell up, my eyes would swell shut, and I'd be down there working on stuff, and I thought I couldn't figure out what it was. I knew I was allergic to lots of things when I was young, but when they asked what all animals were on the farm, that's one of the things they tested for is pig manure. I thought, how would you even test for that? So yeah, they had liquefied. Yeah, keep going. And it was in a vial, so no.
When I was young like that on the farm, I was allergic to work.
Yeah, I know how they test for that. So he's doing the worst job he could possibly do, and it's a shame. We're going to read into this. Well, let's go ahead and read the next section because I want to get into this part of the discussion. Picking up in verse 17, says when he came to his senses. That's very important. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired workers have more than enough food, and here I am dying of hunger? I'll get up, go to my father, and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired workers.'" Is that a hard pill for us to swallow? Pride has pretty much gone at that point. You can imagine he had to be a very prideful young man to have the gall wanting to go to his father and say, "I want my money and go. I can make it." And to go out and live the way he's living, I'm sure he had probably gathered a lot of friends. As long as you got money, you got friends, right? When the money goes, those friends go away. So he moved into a new area, and it was not a Jewish area that he moved into. So I'm sure if he did have people around him, it was because he was buying the drinks or he was doing whatever to have friends at that time. To go from that to coming to his senses, it finally occurred to him. He's probably sitting there saying, "What am I doing?" He may have had this revelation while standing in amongst the hogs, feeding them, thinking back to home, thinking, "Man, our servants have it better than I do, and here I am doing this."
What he was feeding the pigs started looking good.
Yeah, he's thinking about eating the slop. That's serious, isn't it? When you get that far, because I mean, seriously, you think that he's probably thinking about starving to death, literally. And it's a famine in the area, so it's not like today. Things just even if he went out and begged, probably no one would help him. He's not their people, and it is a famine situation going on here. So it's hard for us to get to the point that we have to lay down everything. All the pride has to go away. All this, I'll say self-worth. You almost have to lay it down and get to the point that you're totally broken. Do we have to get like that today for God sometimes? Are we like Him up to this point many times in our lives? You know, when I look at this, it's, you know, there's ways you can look at this, because you can look at it from truly the lost that don't have a relationship with God. But many times I look at this story more so as he had a relationship with his father, and he chose to break that relationship and go off and I'm doing my own thing. We do that with God, don't we? Even when we're saved, we're His children. We know that. But do we ever say, God, I've got this? We may not put it in those words, but our actions speak louder than the words. We're going to go off and do our own thing, because God, I've got this figured out. And sometimes we have to get to a point that we are totally, totally broken to mend that relationship again. That's tough for us, because we're very prideful people. We want to stand on our own, don't we? That's what we're told our whole lives as we're children. Is, you know, from everything we hear, you got to be a, you know, self-made man or self-made woman, that you're standing on your own and going to do these things, and you've got to take care of yourself. Look out for number one. All these things that we are taught growing up. It's hard for us to get past that, because as we do that, and as we have successes in our lives, it kind of feeds that, doesn't it? We can feed ourselves to a point. How many times do you see as athletes? I'll thinking football, basketball mainly. When they're in college and high school, they get all this hype written about them. The sports analysts are writing these columns and talking about them in ball games about how great they are and they can do no wrong, blah, blah, blah. What's the worst thing that an athlete can do when somebody's writing all this about them? Start believing their own hype, isn't it? Start believing your own hype, all of a sudden it becomes this beast that feeds itself. And we've seen people destroy their lives. Antonio Brown. Look at where he was about 3 years ago versus where he's at today, unemployed. And he was one of the best receivers in football. And he's actually come out and made a statement now that he ruined his life because he got in his head he was that good. And I thought it's so interesting that he has come to that realization that things have hit rock bottom for him, that he's actually admitted that. Now, I don't know how much he meant of that, but he's made the statement that I've taken what I had and I've ruined it because of my pride. I think it's what the words he said, it was over his pride. We do this. You know, it's easy to point at other people and say, well, you know that. But we do this. It's funny, and I think about when I think of getting lost and think of driving. You know, we're look at where we are and where God is. Obviously, the best way to get to God is straight line, right? I mean, that's the way we want to go. We want to grow in our life. We want to have this connection with God, that we are moving where He wants us to move, and it's a straight line. That it's very clean. It's a good movement to God, and we're staying in connection with Him. Stuff. But what happens as we're going down this path? Yes, yeah. This off ramp looks pretty good. We'll take that one. This one looks pretty good. We'll take it, and then we do this, and sometimes we come back to here. And we'll go down here, and we'll drive up here, and we drive around circle stuff, and we get frustrated then, because like, well, God, I've done all these things, and you know we're saying we can handle this. I've got this, and sometimes we think we're doing what God wants to do because we haven't prayed, we haven't asked God what He wants us to do. We just assume, well, God obviously thinks like I do, so this is what He would want me to do. Because if I was God, that's what I'd tell me to do. Because obviously we're on the same level, right? Wrong, and it takes us a while to figure this out, and we go down His path, and we get, you know, it's stuff, you know,